Welcome back to the table, friends. I am your host, GreyDMs, and with me, as always, is Owen.
Hi.
Today, once again, we're going to swing that pendulum back to the other side of the microphone, and Owen's going to teach us all about a friendly little game that I don't believe I ever liked.
Yeah.
Flood of memories, just
a
going
flood
back
of memories coming back. Two friends getting angry at each other because one is trying to explain why he wants things the way they are and why the other one's angry that he can't make this god character that no one else is making.
I'm a simple man.
Yeah.
When I make a mistake, I make it 1,000 times, okay?
And then hold it against him the rest of the time you're playing.
Well,
I really think that's like one of my aversions to DMing. Like, I think that put a small scar on me.
Like I will go into it at the end of we don't have to rehash that, but I will after years of looking back, I'll say my piece.
Okay. So what if I were to say to you, there's an RPG out there that you can play in any genre? What would you say?
I'd rather play D&D. Oh, that sounds amazing.
Well, you're in luck.
Tell me more, Mr. Salesman.
I have for you the generic universal role-playing system, otherwise known as GURPS. Yeah, so GURPS, we dipped our toes in this a little bit many years ago. For some of us, it was a fun experience. For others, it was a moment of rebellion and anger. One of us apparently knows why that happened. The other one is still to this day a bit baffled.
There's the anyway, yes.
So yeah, GURPS, first published in 1986 by Steve Jackson Games. It's a name that maybe many of you are familiar with. Unfortunately, you're probably familiar with it for the wrong reason. So yeah, it offered a universal toolkit. One system can handle fantasy, science fiction, historical drama, modern thrillers, pretty much anything you can imagine playing, unless you're someone named Gray. So yeah, let's talk about it. So we've got Steve Jackson. Born in 1953, he began his career designing war games. He became a fan of early role-playing games like D&D. However, this seems to be a theme with a lot of the people we talk about that make these. He found D&D unsatisfying, disliking its inconsistent rules and reliance on multiple dice types. Because it's so many dice. So many dice. So yeah, his frustration made him want to design his own games, and he ended up joining a company called Metagame Concepts, and he created a game called Melee. It was built in 1977, tactical combat microgame, and Wizard, a magic duel microgame. They were later combined into the Fantasy Trip, or TFT, one of the first point-buy RPGs. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So he had a passion for realism in games, and I don't mean like, oh, dragons don't exist, blah, blah, blah. No, his realism is, if a dragon was standing right there and it breathed fire on you, what would it actually do to a person? Okay. Like that's the type of realism he wanted. But that was kind of early on and stuff, so, that kind of thing wasn't real big yet, but it did make him join the Society for Creative Anachronism. So let's talk about the Society for Creative Anachronism. So they kind of, this is from the Wikipedia page. A quip they often use to describe their group is, it's a group devoted to the Middle Ages as they ought to have been. Choosing to selectively recreate the culture, choosing elements of the culture that interest and attract us. So it's all of the good, none of the bad.
I like that. That's like the way everybody should just operate. Right? None of us should claim to be like an accurate representation of anything we're into. We're just showing the things we like. And then you just would have any like cancel culture around any of this stuff, right? Like just,
what do you claim to be? Human? But only the good parts.
Yeah, I don't want to be like a samurai dude running around cutting people's heads off. I don't care if that's real or not. Like,
I just want to do it. I don't want to hurt anybody or cause anybody any problems. I just want to cut heads off of people. I mean, come on.
Like create a beheader. Yeah.
So the Society for Creative Anachronism, it's a global volunteer-driven organization dedicated to the research, recreation, and celebration of pre-17th century history. It was founded in 1966 and brings history to life through immersive hand-on experience, including historical combat, craftsmanship, and cultural exploration. Members of the SCA adopt personas, fictional historical characters rooted in specific time, culture, and region prior to the year 1600. They study the arts, sciences, warfare, and customs of the chosen period and actively recreate those skills from blacksmithing and embroidery to sword fighting and courtly etiquette. So, I mean, honestly sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind, getting into that. So, yeah. He joined that group. He suited up in armor. He fought in medieval combat. This is the stuff he was into. So like he wanted to make a game that kind of represented that. So in 1980, he founded his own gaming company, Steve Jackson Games, and he published successful games like Ogre in 1977 and Car Wars in 1981. And he basically used these to fund his work into creating GURPS. So by 83, he announced his idea for a universal RPG, jokingly calling it Great Unnamed Universal Role-Playing System. So same thing, different kind of backronym, if you want to call it. So, yeah. So anyways, there's a couple other people that were involved with this. We got David L. Pulver. He was a sci-fi author. He helped on some of the expansions, and there's expansions and there's additions. So there are going to be a lot of expansions. There are a lot of expansions, but he worked on Ultratech and vehicles, and he also designed the entire setting for their Reign of Steel expansion. And then there's also Sean Punch, who became a line editor in 1995. He has a master's in high energy physics. Jeez. So let's talk about Sean Punch a little bit. So he's a Canadian game designer, born in 1960. And in the GURPS community, he's known by the moniker Dr. Crom. So it's basically, he's given that name, Dr. Crom, the god of rules. So before he ever joined GURPS or did anything with it, he kind of was just a really big fan. So, like I said, he's got a master's degree in high energy physics. He's got formal training in science, not game development, but his main focus is trying to understand the fundamental forces of the universe and a very high level of theoretical physics and math. So while he was studying that, he had played and run games of D&D and Call of Cthulhu, but GURPS kind of stood out to him because of the realistic exploration, the realism in the game itself. He just liked that it was, grounded in reality. So before he even joined, he was a major contributor for the fan communities early on in the internet. So a lot of people came to him asking about rules, well, if I got a bus dropped on top of me, how much damage would that do? And he kind of became the go-to guy. Like, even though he was not part of the company, people went to him to explain rules. And they'd ask him mechanics questions, and they'd work with him on making house rules and custom content. And he was so good at this that it just seamlessly fit together with working with the original system. So Steve Jackson, spotted this dude. It was just like, holy crap, like this guy is, great at this. So he offered him a job in 1995 as a line editor. So he would oversee the entire production line and become the person responsible for maintaining GURPS internal consistency, ensuring that new supplements worked well with the core system and answering those obscure what if rules. So fans, would just go to him. Steve Jackson's kind of like, yeah, you take care of it.
What does that guy think?
Yeah, but I mean, how cool is that to be like, hey, it's like, I'm a really big fan of D&D and I like doing this stuff. And then, just one day they're just like, hey, you want to work for us and just like make stuff and like live your dream?
The dream.
So yeah, it's just, I'm envious, Orfidi. I'm envious.
The dude that writes XKCD or whatever.
Yeah.
Where he breaks down physics and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like having that dude be like,
right.
Like you like, okay, we're going to ask you how to rationalize all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Game system.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got this.
Yeah. So once he became a line editor, his online answers for fan questions became Crom notes. These were considered almost canon supplements in their own right. So like, it's like the FAQ, it's just like, hey, what's the Crom notes on this? So, I mean, that's just, how cool is that? Lucky. Cool guy. But yeah, his biggest contribution though is he was one of the leading authors behind 4th edition, which launched in 2004. That's pretty much the version that we attempted to play.
Twice.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm going to make this game and I'm going to go find a guy that has a master's in the field that this game is based on. And we're just going to have him, make the rules. So, I mean, we just need to find somebody that has a master's in, I mean, technically what's our...
I don't even know.
We're not there.
Maybe
yet.
That's the problem.
The shape doesn't exist.
We'll figure. We need to find a statistician.
Statistician
or whatever. That's what we need to find.
All right. So, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different supplements that went on. One was a cyberpunk edition. And the author for this was a guy named Lloyd Blankenship. He also had an online hacker moniker called The Mentor. He also wrote a book called The Hacker Manifesto.
Wow.
So in 1990, while he's working on this supplement for Cyberpunk, the Secret Service raids Steve Jackson Games because they think he's creating a hacker training manual.
No, it's a game. It could totally be used to train people to be hacker.
So Lloyd Blankenship, he joined Steve Jackson Games. He already had a reputation as a hacker in the underground. He was a member of several hacker groups in the 1980s, including the notorious Legion of Doom, a group known for exploring, exposing, and sometimes exploiting vulnerabilities in computer networks and phone systems. In 1986, after one of his arrests, he wrote a famous manifesto called The Conscience of a Hacker, which later became better known as the Hacker Manifesto. It was part ideological statement, part defense of the hacker mindset, curiosity-driven rather than criminally motivated. That document is still referenced today in hacker culture. So by the 1980s, Blankenship had pivoted from hacking into joining Steve Jackson Games as a writer and developer. One of his major projects was GURPS, Cyberpunk, a supplement meant to help game masters run games in dystopian high-tech near futures. Think Neuromancer, Blade Runner, Max Headroom, Cyberpunk, Shadowrun, similar things. Blankenship's real-world knowledge of computer networks and hacking made him a perfect fit for the project. The GURPS Cyberpunk promised to be one of the most technically grounded, authentic takes on the genre. It didn't glamorize hacking. Instead, it included realistic details on things like freaking phone hacking systems, network security, and even social engineering. So March 1st, 1990 is where things took a bizarre turn. In the early 1990s, the U.S. Secret Service launched Operation Sun Devil, a broad investigation into computer crime and hacking culture. As part of that, they became aware of Lloyd Blankenship. And when they learned he was working on a book about cyberpunk hacking for a publishing games company, alarm bells went off. So the Secret Service agents raided Steve Jackson's Games Austin, Texas office, and they seized computers, draft manuscripts of GURPS Cyberpunk, company files, even the Office BBS, the basic early communication online bulletin boards. And the agents reportedly told Steve Jackson that GURPS Cyberpunk was a handbook for computer crime.
What year was this again?
1990.
Oh, jeez.
To them, it wasn't fiction. It was an instructional manual written by a known hacker. But I mean, that's street cred right there. It's just like we made an RPG book so good, the Secret Service came.
I know, that is a pretty good. It's kind of funny. This is probably when I was like trolling Prodigy.
Yeah, probably.
And I was, yeah. Anyway,
tell us about it.
No, we're not going to go there. Those are dark times.
So the immediate fallout of this is that the raid crippled Steve Jackson Games' business for months. Production schedules were thrown off. They lost access to their own communication system, and some of the files were never given back to them. So Blankenship was never charged with a crime related to the book. It was purely guilt by association, combined with government misunderstanding of both tabletop RPGs and hacker culture.
So then the U.S. government released FERPs, the federal.
What do? I follow the rules. You win.
Congratulations, citizen.
So the Cyberpunk supplement eventually did come out in 1990 with new tongue-in-cheek tagline on the cover. The book was seized by the U.S. Secret Service.
Oh, that's tongue-in-cheek is really blatant.
It's like, this happened. So Steve Jackson Games decided they were going to fight back against this. So with the help from attorneys and a fledgling new organization called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, Steve Jackson Games sued the Secret Service. The case officially Steve Jackson Games versus United States Secret Service. This is funny. Went to trial in 1993. The judge ruled in favor of Steve Jackson Games, finding that the Secret Service acted illegally by seizing and holding the files. The company's First Amendment rights were violated. The seizure violated the newly enacted Electronic Communications Privacy Act, the ECPA. So Steve Jackson Games was awarded $50,000 in damages plus legal fees. It wasn't a massive payday, but the case set critical legal precedent for digital rights.
3 freaking years of like not having access to these $50,000.
Yeah, here's $50,000 and we'll pay for your lawyers. Establishing that law enforcement couldn't seize electronic publications without due cause, and that digital communication enjoys the same legal protections as physical mail. And it is really weird to think about. Like in the 90s, any of your communications online were completely subject to the government, viewing it and doing whatever they wanted with it. I mean, technically it still does, but now it's but at least now there's like a false cover of, we don't know what that is. But yeah, this incident also directly inspired the formation of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, founded in July 1990. It was founded by John Perry Barlow, Mitch Kapoor, and John Gilmore, all of whom were alarmed by how badly law enforcement misunderstood technology and digital expressions. The EFF, which still exists today, became the primary legal advocacy group for digital civil liberties, and Steve Jackson case remains one of its founding victories.
This is really, it's law enforcement, but it reminds me of that thing where like groups have to go into Congress and like explain to them some sort of like piece of technology.
Yeah,
you guys don't understand this. None of you understand what.
Well, it's like, it was like that whole thing where they brought Zuckerberg up before Congress and they're asking, well, how do I get my cell phone to work on, it's like you're ancient, you're 80 years old, you don't understand any of this. And you're the people making freaking calls on legislation on this stuff.
It's also that website, the dynamically generated website that is gay.com, where people kept suing it because every time they checked it, it was still there. And they're like, it's dynamic.
Yeah.
If you type your name in, it has your name because you typed it in, but you gotta take it down. I typed
don't type your name.
Type your name in it. Like, what are you doing? Good times.
Yeah, good times. So, legacy of that whole incident left a permanent mark on the gaming history and digital rights laws. Cemented GURPS, Cyberpunk is a legendary supplement, not just for its content, but for the real-world chaos it caused. It also gave Steve Jackson Games a kind of punk rock credibility. They weren't just the game designers anymore. They'd stood up to federal overreach and won. In a strange way, it made them even cooler in the eyes of many gamers. The GURPS Cyberpunk book itself remains a collector's item, partially because of its quality, but mostly because it's the book the government didn't want you to see.
As a kid, I was like, oh, this is it. The rumors are there's a secret code to the White House in this one.
But that's like the ultimate, just how badass to just be like, yeah, like the Secret Service came after us because of, our game that we're creating. Like, come on.
No, it's those lids. Especially, it was also probably pretty rife for rumors and stuff like that. Like, what was really in
what was it? Like, this isn't the version they wanted us to see.
This is the tame version, and the hidden secret nuclear codes were in the other version. They figured out how to program. Again, it's that also that like the distance, the sheer like distance between like what you expect of the government, like expecting their competency and what there is. Like when they went back and they found out that there were nuclear codes that were 000.
No one will figure that out.
Yeah, and we're all like, oh, secret.
So also, how ironic is it that it's the cyberpunk version, So it's just like, oh, government and corporate overreach. It's the cyberpunk version. Like, oh man, what's that book about again? Oh yeah. So mid-1990s, Interplay. Some people may be familiar with them. They helped develop a game called Fallout.
Mm-hmm.
They licensed GURPS for their new post-apocalyptic game, Fallout, a GURPS post-apocalyptic nuclear adventure.
Ooh.
Unfortunately, this is the Fallout that almost was. There were some late-stage disagreements over some of the dark humor and violence, and GURPS basically pulled themselves out of it. And, after that, Interplay, they created the special system that if you've played any of the Fallout games, you'd be familiar with. And unfortunately, Fallout went on to be a pretty legendary game, and GURPS kind of missed out on it. But, it happens. We can't all be, perfect. Yeah, Terry Pratchett and GURPS Discworld. So, 1998, Terry Pratchett himself co-wrote GURPS Discworld, ensuring it captured his world and humor authentically. It even included GURPS Lite, a complete system, so Discworld fans could jump right in. Yep. And then there's also Bunnies and Burrows. So, Bunnies and Burrows is a 1976 rabbit-based RPG inspired by Watership Down.
Why?
I know. It became a cult classic, proving GURPS really could handle any.
God.
But I mean, seriously, you could make anything out of it. It's just like GURPS, the mask, I don't mean the good mask with Jim Carrey. So earlier on, I mentioned, Steve Jackson. Some people may recognize that name, but probably for the wrong reason. It's because there's two Steve Jacksons.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So there's Steve Jackson, born in 1953, founder of Steve Jackson Games based in Austin, Texas, designer of GURPS, Melee, The Fantasy Trip, Car Wars, Munchkin, and many others.
That's what I was waiting for. I was like, Munchkin's where I know him.
And then there's Steve Jackson in the UK, born in 1951, co-founder of Games Workshop, co-creator of Fighting Fantasy, and published early UK versions of D&D.
They're also Steve Jackson, the creator of Lord of the Rings?
Yes, there is Steve Jackson, the creator of Lord of the Rings, but the reason that these two Steve Jacksons get confused because they're both game creators that both went. So I'll get into it. So in early 1980, both Steve Jacksons were rising stars in the tabletop gaming world. The problem, both were working on fantasy games, game books, and RPG content. Both were publishing in English language markets, but on opposite sides of the Atlantic. Both contributed to the Fighting Fantasy series at different times. Both worked on RPG rule sets.
To the same series.
Yes. Both were well known in convention circuits. Many gamers just assumed they were the same person.
Steve Jackson. No, not UK.
Not UK Steve Jackson.
That's not you, Steve Jackson.
If you were a young gamer in the 1980s browsing a fanzine or a gaming magazine and saw Steve Jackson, you had no easy way to know which one it was unless you also saw which company was listed. Steve Jackson Games versus Games Workshop. And even that wasn't always clear because they both wrote for magazines like White Dwarf and Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, some UK gamers believed GURPS was a Game Workshop product because they associated Steve Jackson with Games Workshop. Conversely, some American gamers assumed Fighting Fantasy was linked to Steve Jackson Games in Texas. This branding headache caused enough issues that Steve Jackson US and Steve Jackson UK eventually had to clarify publicly that we're two entirely different people, just operating the same hobby with the same name at roughly the same time.
I'm not this man.
He is not me. I am not him.
Sure, we may share all our hobbies and our fashion sense and our passing visual appearance to each other,
but he wears a hat,
and I'm not British, and I have a cowboy hat, which confuses things because he's from Texas and I
know he has a cowboy hat. I have this Tribbley, but I'm from Texas and he's from the UK.
Maybe we shouldn't bring up that point.
All right, so some GURPS mechanics we'll get into here. So around the 1980s, most RPGs used random character generation. You rolled dice for attributes, maybe randomly determined your class, and the game put you into a narrow archetype. GURPS flipped this on its head, offering a point-buy character creation form from the beginning. So players start with a pool of points and spend them on attributes: strength, dexterity, intelligence, health, skills, and advantages. Things like wealth, combat reflexes, eidetic memory. You could also take disadvantages, physical handicaps, psychological quirks, or enemies, which gave you more points to spend. This gave GURPS unmatched flexibility in character creation. You could build exactly the character you imagined unless you're someone named Gray.
Yeah, I have huge problems with that point. But
instead of squeezing your concept into predefined classes or templates, this was essentially for a game designed to work in any genre. A secret agent in a spy thriller needs very different abilities than a wizard in a high fantasy setting, and GURPS accomplished that from day one. So it has the 3d6 roll under system. So they use 3d6 for almost all rolls. Succeeded in action, you roll and try to get under your skill level or attribute on a scale of 3 to 18. Roll 3 or 4, it's a critical success. 17 or 18, critical failure. This bell curve probability creates more predictable results than flat roll like a d20. Characters with moderate skills succeed most of the time, and extreme outcomes are rare, mirroring real life. This is particularly valuable in realistic settings where you didn't want outcomes to feel purely random. Unfortunately, having the rare outcome is really fun.
It's exciting, yeah. And also, just because it was flipped.
Yes.
It
you wanted low numbers instead of high numbers.
Yeah, so it also felt, and I know this is just completely in the head, but as gamers, we understand this. Mm-hmm. Some people feel like they are a little lucky in specific situations, and it felt punishing because of that.
Yeah.
Because I would roll so many 6s and 5s when we played the game. And I was just like, this feels, any other game, I'd be succeeding.
Well, it's like one particular person at our table would be a god at this game.
This is built for me.
Next thing, tech levels. So to handle different eras, prehistoric to sci-fi, GURPS introduced tech levels, or TL. Every world or piece of gear gets a tech level number from 0, which would be the Stone Age, to TL 12 plus, far future hypertech. The character's familiarity with technology directly affected their ability to use, repair, or even understand equipment from outside their area. A simple system like GURPS seamlessly handled time travel campaigns, alien first contact, or lost in future plots without needing custom rules for each genre. If you take a Roman legionnaire to a cyberpunk future, the mechanics already account for their confusion with future tech. And they also had modular genre supplements. So you had the core book with all the rules and everything in it, but these supplements added new plug and play expansions, basically. So you could new basic attributes, different dice rolls, combat resolutions, basic rules for skill, advantage, disadvantage, then setting specific rules like magic, psionics, cinematic martial arts, matrix, starship design, and it's all just through these optional supplements. And again, it lets you make the game basically as complex as you want to in any setting that you really want to. All the work's already been put into it. And the big thing that they wanted to stick to is the realism in all of this. So weapon damage was often derived from actual energy outputs in joules. Armor effectiveness matched real-world penetration data. The time to reload a crossbow or the weight of plate armor was based on actual historical sources. So it just made it feel credible when you're using it. If you're wearing a heavy plate armor, you're not going to be running anywhere.
Yeah.
Like in D&D, it's just like, oh, you have disadvantage on stealth checks, and that affects the weight you carry. But in this, it's real. If you're trying to run through a forest in plate armor, good luck. I have the 1 second combat round. So GURPS uses a 1 second combat round, which is far shorter than most other RPGs. Many use 6 seconds or 10 seconds rounds. This allows for very granular tactical decisions. Movement and actions happen simultaneously, not sequentially. Fight feels like a real-time flurry of quick actions, dodge, swing, reposition, instead of abstract turns. So yeah, it was really good for tactics if you're in a low fantasy or combat campaign, because your enemy doesn't wait for your turn. Everything's just happening at the same time. So you have to make decisions quickly and do things. And they had a really detailed injury system. So you had shock penalties, temporary penalties from sudden pain, bleeding rules, first aid. If you don't have first aid, you're starting to bleed out. Limb injuries. So you can actually disable a leg or a hand instead of just having straight hit points. And then your character advancement is done through play points, which you just earn from playing the game, and you can use these to add abilities, build stats, do all those things. And then you also have social advantages and disadvantages, which is common in most games that we play now. So let's talk about a few of the additions that they've got here. So there's really not too many. So you have first edition, 1986, added most of the rules that we're familiar with, most of the things I talked about, the point buy system, 3d6, advantages, disadvantages, technology levels, everything like that. Second edition, 1987, not long after, just basically was the FAQ, corrected and clarified a lot of things, cleaned up minor issues, revised some of the terminology. Not a whole lot. Third edition, how many years it took between second and third edition? 1988. This is the first major revision, expanded, refined character options, skill, advantages, disadvantages, introduced more optional rules, expanded combat, improved support for different genres. But this one lasted from 1998 to 2004. So really long time. There's also the GURPS Compendium 1 and 2 that was made in 1996. It was just because the game had become so expansive and because there were so many rulebooks to it, this was basically just a compendium of all those rules in one place so you could get to it. It's just a giant GURPS encyclopedia. GURPS Lite 1998 was a free simplified version of the core rules, just 32 pages, mainly just used to introduce you to the game, kind of like original D&D versus AD&D. Was often included in box sets, so like the GURPS Discworld expansion setting. Yes, sorry, words elude me. So like something like that, the supplemental books, they would give you this light version, just easier to play. And then the fourth edition came out in 2004. 20 years the game was in that setting, and then 2004 they made the fourth edition. This is the one where Sean Punch came in and they really just consolidated everything down to the core mechanics, cleaned it up, made it more streamlined. They balanced the point system a bit more so things made more sense and more real, simplified and modernized presentation for new generations. Yeah. So they combined characters and campaigns into 2 comprehensive core books, made point costs more consistent. Yeah, I kind of said that already. This was the first time that they did a big full color modern layout book, though, kind of like, what we were used to with the vampire books. But they also did digital distribution, so they had PDFs and things like that you can get your hands on. But yeah, that's GURPS for the most part.
That is indeed GURPS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell me, Gray, why do you hate GURPS?
I would like to say I don't hate GURPS.
Every time I've brought it up, it was immediately turned down.
I didn't realize how strongly I felt about this until you talking about it made me upset. That's the level I have of aversion for this game. And I know it is going to be a probably a personality thing. It is okay. So you'll have to remind me. Did we played 2 games in this?
No, we only played 1.
We only played 1.
Yes.
So maybe I'm forgetting which one it was. Like it was the I'm thinking it was the one that we played where I just made the dude punch people. Is that because like I couldn't make the character I wanted to make and I just made him?
I don't remember just the punch people thing because from what I remember, you made like some kind of rogue-esque character.
Oh, what was the game where we did that like weird little steampunk game like for 2 sessions or something like that? And I played like Bill, and it was like when Bill hears the bell ring, he becomes a boxer again.
Oh, I remember that, but I couldn't tell you. I don't remember that far back.
I thought that might have been GURPS too.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, but I don't think it was because I don't think I could have gotten you to play it a second time.
This is a good point. I feel like a bastard. This is not my personality. So, okay, I'm gonna give myself an out here and say that like we were relatively coming off where like a year or 2 earlier, like we had ended a relationship where I was kind of adversarial with it.
Yes.
And back then, to be honest, we had a weird dynamic between me, you, and Max. And like, I don't want to say this without your job and enjoyment in the group was often to poke and to have fun. And I was often the kind of person. So I just want to give myself that out to say that I may have not been
blame the victim. I see. I see the playbook here.
No, but here was what happened as far as I can remember is I came up with an idea. I tried to implement the idea using the rules.
Yes.
And I was like, but this doesn't make sense to me. Could I get more points to make this make sense? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's a whole discussion that goes with like the art that we understand now, many years later, about the archetypes and the type of players.
Right.
So clearly I was like, I want this experience and the system doesn't work with it. And you were like,
well, the thing was yes, the system does work with it. If it was the difference in D&D terms, it was the difference between starting at a level 1 character and starting at like a level 15 character.
Yeah, but maybe, but like I vaguely, because it was like the thing that I was missing was like it was a knowledge-based skill or something like that, where I was like, I should also have that.
Yes, because you basically described it as, this is my guy, this is his job, so he should know these things. But I also want this guy to be like really strong, know how to fight really well, and also be super smart.
It does seem like just the worst player
because the whole thing was like I just had this idea of this guy and like he swings around like this crowbar thing, like I don't know why that sticks in my head, like it's probably not even what he said. It was you wanted to swing around like heavy things, so you're like, I have this guy and like he's a big guy, he's really muscular and blah blah blah, but he's also a civil engineer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was thinking of him as this is so long ago, and we didn't and I didn't play this character.
No, you didn't.
So like
we argued about it, and you said, "Fine, I'm just gonna make this," and then you just made this a character to annoy the fuck out of me.
Just the character, the shadowy. Just like, I do nothing, but I'm unspottable, and I can pick any. Because I was also pissed off at the system, but like I wanted to have this archetype of like the the combat engineer.
Yeah.
The guy who was just like, I fix things, but like I'm out fixing them, and like I was ticked off that to get the thing I wanted that made sense in my head, I had to sacrifice the knowledge portion of it. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't I have both? Either way, the point is, I know, like you guys are like, Gray, you learned to, the point was like, I had to abandon that character and make something else. I probably should have done it without spite.
There was a lot of spite.
But it was like I said, and like I said, honestly, it maybe there was projection from, like I said, the previous thing. I also think that you got to remember that the first game that we played after leaving that DM, like I played a game with you and you basically talked me into giving you a book in which you wrote things and they happened.
So I don't remember that so much as me convincing you to do that.
Wouldn't it be cool?
I just think I talked about it and you said, wow, that's neat. Let's do that.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, think about how much fun we got out of that character. One of our funniest stories involves that character screwing someone, and then 2 years later, that person holding the grudge.
At some point, we're going to have a video about that person. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to defend myself when I shouldn't. I was young, dumb, and stupid, but like, it goes to my problem with the system. And my problem with the system is that there are certain types of personalities that if you give a system where you can create anything, they are burdened by two things. They're burdened with wanting to make the thing they have in their head, but wanting to make it feel like the thing in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And since they understand rules, they're looking at the rules going, that's not going to feel like the thing in my head. Right? And I think in those situations over the past few years, what we've learned is I think the DM has to make the character for them. Because you can then spend the points to level up and make changes down the road. But you have to cultivate the character to be like, look, I understand how the rule systems work. I understand how the parties thing, and this is how far I'm willing to let you take it to get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I agree. This is like the primary role. This is how, like, I think this all works out. And then when you reach the point where you're happy, you then give it back to the player and like, okay, now you can.
And then the player goes, this isn't what I wanted. And now they're pissed at the DM again.
Well, but then it's really their fault, right? Like, but it's the thing. It's the thing about GURPS is like, it's this duality of, because the game can describe anything, it can't describe anything. Right? Because like the game can't describe like a Navy SEAL.
But it can.
It can't with accuracy, with like describe this. It can't with a budget.
Okay, but if you're playing a game and you're like, I want normal people to do this, you don't start with a Navy SEAL.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is like, it's the problem where like, whatever you're playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people that don't have a quantifiable point.
Okay, I get that. I get that.
And because a game is point by, you have to pay for everything.
Right. But
so you have to sacrifice things. What I'm saying is I'm a huge fan of like having detriments to your character and stuff like that, but you have to sacrifice normal things.
But I 100% agree. But I think that comes down to the setting that the DM is putting you in. So if the DM is just like, I want you guys to be normal people put into an abnormal situation, you, the player, have to figure out that character that fits into being a normal person.
Right.
But if you're like, well, I want a Navy SEAL in that normal situation, that's not the guidelines that you have been given. Because basically you were creating Jack Reacher where the rest of everybody else was creating Karen that works at, a cashier at the, Meijer or something like that, and that was the duality I was running into, where we kept butting heads, because I get where you're coming from. You're like, I want to make this character because I can make anything I want in this. And I was like, that's cool. You can't make that character because that character doesn't exist as a normal fucking person with, that hasn't gone through Navy SEAL training, hasn't gone into special ops and blah, blah, blah. That's not a character that would be in the situation. So like, that's not the character you're going to make. And we just butted heads against it so much that you're like, fine, I'm going to make a character with the points that I have to make them just to piss you off. And that's what you did.
It was just to piss you off, but like, it did feel like I was tackling both you and the game system at the same time. Like, to be very clear, a large portion of this was like animosity to the system.
Yeah.
Because I thought that...
I just don't get the animosity, because it's like coming into D&D and being like, create a character. It's like, well, my character's a level 20 paladin.
No, I don't think it is. I think the thing that you're just not hearing is that in D&D, when you make a level 1 paladin, especially like you go up to a level 3 paladin has been crafted to sell something.
Right.
And there are parts of it that, like, if you tried to quantify to a point buy system, would never make sense, right? Like, you would just smite or something, like something incredible that they could do that felt really good, that sold the narrative of playing it. And because these games that are like trying to be realistic, and because that thing is over the top, they can't like the economy of the game can't allow you to have that specialness.
Well, okay, I agree, but that's just the cost of leveling your character, in my opinion, because at that point, as you level up, you get the points and you can do the things. Because the characters that we created, or my expectation in that game was the characters were never going to become magical whatever. They could get items that could help them do that kind of stuff, but it was never supposed to be the character had that innately.
Yeah, and going back, I don't know why I didn't understand that, but like I don't know if that wasn't conveyed. Right, because you didn't tell us, like, based on what we played, we had no idea what we were really going into.
Well, no, I told you guys you were normal people in the normal world, and the game itself started that way, and then there was the flip. Yeah, you guys got sent someplace.
Yeah, and it was the flip, but like,
you guys got isekai'd.
I know, but like, I'm gonna put this, I don't remember you detailing it within those restrictions. And like, once again, I want to go back and I was not making like Jack Reacher. I was trying to make an engineer.
Right. I know.
Like, I was just trying to make
but he had the capabilities of being Jack Reacher.
Well, like I said, there's a really frustrating thing that happens when you're like, I honestly think I was trying to make basically a self-insert character. And so I wanted two main things. I wanted to be physically big. I was 20 something. I'd gone through football and stuff like that. That was me. And I wanted him to be like technically adept and smart.
Right.
And the game I could not get those two things to where I felt they should be.
And that was just because that was the limitation of the points that I gave you guys. Like, we could have started further on, but I didn't feel that was realistic.
Right. And then, like, because of that, there's this disconnect, right? Because you're planning, you're like, oh, you're going to make a character within this threshold and we're going to move on and then maybe you could get there. And I'm like, but the character, the person who's already, I'm self-inserting, should already be there.
Yeah.
And it's not because he's carrying around a magic hammer. It's not because it's just like, that is the innate part of the character right now. This doesn't make sense to me. This amount of points cannot produce what I thought I was. Like, it could not hit. So
what you're saying is you as the self-insert are far above and beyond average man.
Exactly, because there's no like detriment in there that says like you have crippling self-anxiety. Like, I couldn't subtract enough.
No, they made a supplement.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Sacrifices future for
that's in the 2016 supplement.
Yeah. But it's just, like I said, there's aside from what we did and what happened, aside from that, my big complaint about these things is it very much feels like, too many cooks or the broth kind of thing, where like you have so many options, nothing feels special. Like I get simulation, these simulation games where they can they're breaking down and people are arguing about but I really want to know what the damage difference between a bus hitting a person and dynamite going off and the nuances of that. As a nerd, the nerd side of me, I'm that is very interesting. I hate playing them. They're just not fun, right? I want to sit across from the table and play cards with the devil kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not sit there and go okay, let me count how many units of jewels go into a punch, determine a dice value, roll 3 dice, always roll too high and fail no matter what. You just... And I am of the archetypes of people that sit down at your table, and I do recognize this, when at my worst, I'm a very bad archetype.
I know.
I'm I'm going to burn this table to the ground kind of archetype, and I've spent time trying to fix myself and go to therapy.
Well, it's there's moments, and we've had a couple recently where I was on the other side of the table where you begin to get a look, and I realized that look is, I don't believe this, or I don't think
I'm checking out.
Yes. And I understand that, but at the same time, it's your enjoyment is only part of the table. So
100%. Like I said, part of life is understanding the kid in you, and realizing that the kid is driving your emotions, and so sometimes the adult has to grab the wheel, and it's a big thing when. Like I said, it's a super frustration point where I'm just this makes complete sense narratively that this thing.
I'm going to go hide out in the woods while everybody else searches the house.
I don't think that was okay.
No, I don't think that was out. That's just it. I don't think that was out of character in any way, shape, or form. That was perfect for your character. It was awful for me because I'm I am failing here because he thinks that's the best thing that his character should do.
Dan, I really wish you didn't feel that.
It's I haven't created enough tension or enough reason for him to feel like he needs to go in there and help them. And then all the things happen where it's I should really go in there and help them. And then you left. Something horrible is happening here. I better get outside.
I gotta go home, guys. Take that stuff and go home.
It was funny because I'm just that is perfectly logical.
I know.
His character is doing in fact, you only really did one thing that I was just no, he wouldn't have done that. And that was when you waited for them to come out. I was just no, he would have left. You would have been where's the stuff I left? I better go grab that. Free truck.
Well, maybe someday we can hire a therapist and have a really good session on what my problem discipline.
No, I thought long and hard about this the last couple days.
Oh, geez.
I think I've got it. So
all right, that's scary. That's terrifying.
Yeah, we'll see if it hits. You're either going to go oh, cool, that works. Fuck, I don't like this, but that works. Or you're going to be nah, that's dumb.
Could happen either way.
It's literally all going to be determined by a switch in your head, where if you decide, yes, I'm going to let my character care about this, or no, this is something he can just throw away.
Okay. Well, I will work on trying to be a yes and.
I mean, you don't have to be. If Carlos decides he's walking, well, we'll have someone else come.
And not be the petulant child who's I'm going to burn your campaign to the ground.
I honestly can say that so far this is probably, the heist one went pretty smooth too, but I think it's because we collaborated on that one.
Oh, the heist.
The tower, the party.
Oh, yeah. That went pretty good too. Yeah, I said it on the podcast before. I know we're going off topic. We're going to wrap up very shortly. But I did say this on the podcast before when we were talking before the break about how I thought everybody at the table was a better role player than I. And because I said, you guys have had all this experience and I've watched you guys grow and stuff. There's a dark side to that, which is a kid here trying to figure out how to play with friends, sometimes. And
see, I don't think that's a problem because you have to realize, we're all role playing, but we're all role playing with you. So I don't think that's an issue.
As long as you guys continue to role play with me, instead of start throwing rocks at me, it'll be okay. All right,
Sean.
I don't know where we are anymore, so I think we're going to
wrap this up.
All right, guys. I don't know if you're still listening, but if you are, I question what you're doing right now. But hey, thanks for listening to us.
Hope you liked GURPS.
Go play GURPS. And then please, if you feel frustrated by it, tell me directly. Okay, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.